You're listening to Radio Lab.
Radio Lab.
From WNY.
C.
Yep.
And NPR.
Okay, just to get things rolling. This is a story that we heard about.
Okay, I give him enough to talk about after.
First, from the following dude. Hey, is it Mick or is it Mike?
I go by Mick. There's way too many mics around.
Okay. Mick Menego is his name.
Down here,
and we met Mick recently at the Emeryville Marina, which is not far from San Francisco, where he's got a boat called the Superfish that Mick says he rents out for all kinds of things.
Nature trips to ash scattering, bachelor parties, fireworks watching, I don't care. I got a little cardboard sign. I stand by the freeway. It says, have boat, need work.
So yeah, that's Mick. And our story begins one morning in December.
Probably 8 o'clock in the morning or something, as I recall.
This is a few years back. Mick was just kind of sitting at home.
I was at home, yeah. It was the middle of December. We didn't have any work.
But then he gets this call.
Hello? I got this call. Hello there.
It was a call relaying a message from a fisherman way out at sea.
18 miles maybe outside the Golden Gate Bridge. They told me that there was a whale in trouble, tangled up in crab gear, and it didn't appear to be able to move.
So after he hangs up, Mick immediately calls a few dive buddies.
Tim Young,
Air Force Pararescue.
and then let's see,
James Mosquito.
James Mosquito.
Professional diver.
I called him and said, hey, here's the deal. Are you interested?
It was a no-brainer.
I said, yeah, I'm in.
Absolutely.
Figured, all right, we're going.
So I packed up my stuff.
Grabbed my gear and I went directly to the boat.
And we left underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Nothing but the horizon in front of us. My name is Holly Drouillard. I am James's significant other. We motored out for about 2 hours. Headed due west towards the Farallon Islands.
What were you feeling when you were on the boat heading out?
I didn't think we'd find her. I really didn't.
But about 18 miles off the coast, completely open water, one of the divers spots some crab buoys in the distance and some seagulls flying overhead. And as they got closer...
Well, I saw the whale.
It was just
the very top of the whale.
sticking up about maybe 6 inches out of the water.
At the surface.
A tiny sliver of black.
And that was it. I said, okay, we need to see what's going on. So
Tim and James jump into an inflatable boat, and they paddle about a couple hundred feet from the whale.
And it just wasn't happening. Every time that this whale came on up, it would just displace the boat back again. So it would push us back again.
Not to mention,
the visibility in the water was just terrible.
they couldn't even see down there to see, what they were dealing with.
And you know what? Sometimes plans have to change in mid-flight.
So Tim and James look at each other, and without saying a word,
Boom. We got out of the boat and
Splashed into the water.
I see a shadow. This massive animal.
A hazy silhouette.
And we just started swimming.
To the whale. About 100 feet away.
Parts of blubber and skin floating around.
35 feet. 20 feet.
and then they see it.
My goodness, this thing's the size of a school bus.
A female humpback whale is one of the largest creatures on the planet. 50 feet long, 50 tons. And this particular whale was in a kind of C shape, where its head was at the top of the water, but its tail was almost pointed directly down.
It was almost like somebody was pulling her down by the tail to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, there was probably 20 crab traps, 2,000 pounds at least, just tied up to the tail.
She had just become an anchor.
Anchored.
And to see her not be able to move that tail and to struggle.
Just like, the whale was actually really laboring to breathe. It's a little puff, and there was just rope everywhere. It went around the whale's mouth, around the whale's head,
across her eye, over her back,
wrapped around the pectoral fins, all the way down to his tail. I thought there was no hope.
There's no chance.
We're looking at a dead whale. The whale just doesn't know it yet. But I knew that I had to try. I'm going to swim to the whale. And as soon as I decided, okay, I'm going to swim to the whale, well, the whale decided she wasn't going to have that.
What'd she do?
She put up her pectoral fin, which is like her arm. And this pectoral fin's about 15 feet long. It's about 4 feet wide. And she just splashed down the water in front of me. it's the size of an airplane wing coming down on top of you, just inches from my head. So at that point, I backed off and waited.
Waited for the whale to settle down,
She was physically exhausted.
which she did. And then they both swim back. James goes to the tail, and Tim up to the whale's head,
I was there with a 6-inch dive knife,
cutting out line right near her eye.
which was the size of a grapefruit. And her eye was moving, keeping an eye on me.
Really?
Absolutely.
He would go left, her eye would go left. He'd go right, her eye would go right.
She was tracking me.
And all the while, they're just cutting as much rope as they can.
You really had to saw at it. It was very strong, very tight. Sometimes I'd cut a rope and it would be a loose rope, and all of a sudden something else would tighten up, which was the one rope that would let it all free.
This whole process took hours. But finally, James gets to the end of it. He's at the tail sawing his way through that big clump of line, and he realizes at a certain point that to cut through all that
I'm
line,
going to have to stab the whale to get my knife underneath the rope. It was that tight. So I jabbed my knife into the whale's tail and pulled the rope and then cut it.
and at once the rope went.
It was a very surreal moment looking down and seeing the 20 crab traps and buoys just disappear into the abyss.
And just like that, the whale was gone.
I'm spinning around going, where'd she go? Where'd she go?
But as the water settled, they realized they'd done it. They'd freed her.
As soon as I came up, I was like, woohoo, wow, hooping it up and yelling. And
Unbelievable. I was screaming. Can you imagine?
Now here's where the story takes a pretty startling turn. In fact, the whole reason we wanted to tell this story to begin with is for what happens next. So Tim and James and the other divers are in the water. They're celebrating, high-fiving. And then all of a sudden, James looks down.
Next thing I know, I have this 50-ton whale coming right at me. I'm thinking, oh my God, stop, I just saved you.
Wait, so this whale is coming at you from below, like Jaws?
Yeah, she's rising up towards me.
Oh, God.
And I was just thinking, this is going to hurt. And when she was only inches away from my chest, she stopped. And pushed me on the chest backwards. And then released me and then kind of pushed again. And then released and pushed again. And again.
Wow.
And then she swam up right next to me, picks her head up above the water so that her eye was above the water. And then came up and looked directly at me.
And for what felt like 30 seconds, he says, she just stared at him.
The pupil didn't move around. She wasn't looking for anything else. She was just looking at me. You're in the presence of something that great. Makes you feel small. Yeah. It really was a very emotional feeling. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it.
But then he says she went off to the next diver.
Did the same thing.
I remembered distinctly, I was 18 inches away from her eye, and she just looked at me and let me touch her, and then swam off.
Then she went off to the next diver and did the same thing, and the next person and did the same thing.
One by one.
Coming up right next to him, looking at him really good, inches away, eyeballing him.
She swam around to every diver.
All the guys got it.
So it was about dusk. The water was glass flat. I was sitting at the helm of the boat, just in awe. And they had to leave the whale. She didn't want to leave them.
Now there's a real question here. What exactly was that whale doing? Or saying? Was she saying anything? If you ask James or Tim or Mick or any of the other divers that were in the water that day, they'll tell you.
I felt this whale was really thanking us.
I know it sounds crazy, but I could see the look in her eye. This mammal, this this 50-ton mammal was literally saying thanks. Thanks for helping me out. And, I'll bring that to my grave, knowing the gratification that I felt